Olá, boa noite. É um prazer estar aqui de volta com vocês mais essa semana. Eu sou o Heverton Anunciação, consultor, escritor em CRM e experiência do cliente. Eu criei essa revista eletrônica Person of the Week para trazer semanalmente a história de importantes profissionais do setor de atendimento ao cliente no Brasil e no exterior. O nosso apoiador e patrocinador exclusivo é a Zoho, um dos principais fornecedores de soluções de sistema da nuvem no mundo, inclusive a solução Zoho CRM. Antes, eu quero te convidar ao seguinte: se inscreva no canal, assine as notificações para você ser avisado para assistir as atuais e as novas lives. Caso você não compreenda o idioma inglês hoje, eu sugiro você, depois que terminar a live, ative a tradução simultânea no YouTube, que você vai poder traduzir para o seu idioma desejado. Então, sem mais, eu quero começar com a apresentação da nossa convidada de hoje. A nossa convidada é a Lorelei Salas. Ela é responsável pelo Departamento de Proteção do Consumidor da cidade de Nova York, o DCWP. Ela nasceu no Peru e ajudou muito a situação de imigrantes na cidade. Ela foi designada como comissária do Departamento da cidade de Nova York, de Proteção ao Consumidor e Worker Protection, em 2016. Ela gerencia a agência que tem automaticamente 400 profissionais, envolvendo advogados, investigadores, pesquisadores, analistas políticos, para trabalhar essa relação entre empresas e consumidores. Em 2009, Salas foi designada pelo presidente Obama para trabalhar na área de administração de horas e salários do Departamento de Salários dos Estados Unidos. Antes disso, ela trabalhou como advogado-geral do Departamento de Litigação e Bureau de Trabalho e Investigações de Negócios para Violações dos Estados Unidos e também na área de saúde. Ela iniciou a carreira dela como assistente de advogado, também em Nova York, na área de Labor Bureau, em 2007, e ela ganhou a formação dela na Benjamin N. Cardozo Law School, e aí foi admitida para New York State em Federal Court. Tá? Sem mais delongas. Lorelei, welcome to share your story with us.
Hi, Heverton. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I love New York. I love when I've been there. I love it. When I've been in New York, I had two dreams. First of all, meet. Okay, some people don't like him, but I like it. I like to meet personally Woody Allen. I met him in Carlisle Hotel. I had the opportunity to interview him and to know all the museums of New York.
Okay. Yes. The museums are amazing. They're amazing.
Yeah.
And I hope to see you sometime here in New York City.
Yeah, you invite to Brazil. If you need something, just ask me, okay?
Will do.
Okay. So, Lorelei, as assistant attorney, you start your career in Labor Bureau in US in 2002. But when I saw your background, you chose just hard work in your life. Defend right of the workers, help consuming their financial education, consumer right, and you help many immigrants in New York.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's not just along for just one life. How you migrate for a consumer?
Yes, thank you for that question. And you describe the mission now of my agency, right? The Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. We're trying to do a lot. It is a lot to make sure that the laws that protect workers are being complied with and make sure that the rights the consumers have are being complied with. And on top of that, we also have an office that has programs to improve the financial health of New Yorkers. So it's a lot. And even though we have about 400 employees in my office, it's still a small size agency for New York City. As you said, we have so many immigrants in New York that we have to be able to get to people, to connect with them in different languages, right? In different ways. Some people have more technology at their disposal, others don't. So it is, it's a complicated job, but it's something that I care a lot about. I'm an immigrant too, so I feel like New York was really good to me, allowed me all these options in my life and to pursue the career that I wanted. And I want to make sure that as much as I can do from my office, I bring the same opportunities to other people coming to New York to make a life here.
Yeah, and how was the invitation you received? Okay, Lorelei like problem, go put that to solve the problem of the consumer. How was the invitation? How was
So it's interesting. I work for the mayor of New York City, right? He appointed me to this position. And I didn't know the mayor, but the way that I was invited to interview for the role and that I was given the job, I have worked in the past with several organizations that work with immigrants, right? On different issues, on housing rights, on immigration rights, on workers' rights, and that they knew that this big agency that basically enforces consumer protection law was also going to begin to enforce workers' rights. And we're talking about the same people, the same working New Yorkers who are, working really hard to make a living, are the consumers that we need to focus on, right? They are the consumers who most need the government to help them in their daily lives. As you probably know, in the U.S., there's lots of lawyers. I'm an attorney, right? So there's a lot of private lawyers, and there are people who can hire a private attorney to solve a dispute in court. But you do not have to hire a lawyer if you can come to our office and file a complaint with us. And that's why I always try to make sure that our resources, our efforts are devoted to issues that affect everyday New Yorkers who cannot afford to go and hire a lawyer and go to court on their own.
Yeah, I got it. Before the next question, I want to show you something. I don't know if you know about this saint. In Brazil, all consumer, when try to fix something with a company, they pray for this saint.
Oh.
It's an impossible cause. Okay, if I am a consumer, okay, let's pray for Saint Expedite to solve the problem with my company that I face a problem. There's a famous saint in Brazil.
That's so interesting. I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's a saint for impossible cause.
Oh.
So in Brazil, okay, we have many websites for complaint, whatever. Mm-hmm. But what you think many of consumers in New York are facing how and to reduce the effort. Okay, problem we are going to have. But what do you think the main problem of the company in New York to reduce the effort to receive the complaint of the consumer in New York? Because in Brazil, okay, we have Dissent, we have main site, but how is the effort? The company are doing their homework or no? What do you think?
I want to say that a lot of businesses and companies in New York are doing the right thing, right? Many of them are really well aware of all the laws and rules that they have to follow, right? And there's different levels, right? We're not talking just about New York City laws, but New York State, in the federal laws. We have 3 different levels of government. So it can be a lot. And for the most part, I think that we have a lot of interest in following all these laws, but you also have to recognize that we have a lot of business owners who are also immigrants, right? They come from other countries, speak other languages, and sometimes they bring with them their business practices. They may be legal in other countries, but they may not be legal in the US, right? Or New York. It's true. And I've seen it throughout my career in different roles. So we feel that it's important for us as an agency, not just to invest resources in enforcing the law, but also to educate our business owners, right?
Yeah, right.
And so we don't assume that you as a business owner, that you know everything you need to do to respect your consumers' rights. We try to publish a lot of materials in different languages that tell you as a business owner what you need to do to be fine, to avoid fines and to not have complaints filed against you. And then we publish the same materials for consumers in different languages to make sure that consumers can understand what their rights are when they interact with a business, right? So it really depends, I have to say. Some of the biggest cases that we have in my office right now are against big corporations, right? And they're not necessarily the brick and mortars, the mom and pop shops in the the corner of my blog. They are some big corporations that we believe have employed deceptive practices and are actually targeting the most vulnerable New Yorkers. New Yorkers who are poor and New Yorkers who maybe are, black or brown, immigrants, and don't speak the language, right? So we try to again put our efforts on enforcement more against these big companies that have the ability to comply, right? They have the resources to comply. And with the small businesses, we try to also do more education and outreach and help them to come into compliance.
Yeah, very challenging, very big challenges, because you know that when you talk about said about this, okay, how to convince the entrepreneur that the Chinatown, Japantown, so it's very big challenge for you in your department. Yeah, it's a big challenge. Now the next question, I'm going to show some slides. For example, I try to bring data from, for example, in São Paulo, the biggest city in Brazil. For example, in 2021, the main problem that we are facing now is regard telecom, electricity, telecom, and retail. The big five in just in 2021. In 2019, retail, telecom, electricity, telecom. Always the big company, as you said. For Brazil, São Paulo, the biggest city in Brazil. I try to find open data from New York, because I know that you have a phone number 311, okay? Accessing your data from New York open data, I found some similarity that you said, big company, contractor, okay, about industry. For example, if I took this data about a specific industry, complaint type, you see about the type of legislation, because of course this kind of consumer need an attorney to clarify the contract, okay? And if I got it, a cloud of word for New York, you see always licensing and fee, okay? The contract was not clear. If you see what happened, for example, in New York, using the open data of New York. My question is, let me see here. What are your perception, the main problem that consumers are facing right now with company? Okay, you said about big company, but what are the main type of the problem? A contract is about, here in Brazil, we are facing many problems, but we are going to talk about this later.
Yes, and Heverton, the data that you showed, right? I am going to say it's probably the most recent that we have from like 2019, maybe early 2020, right? I have to tell you that for 2020, for most of the time when the pandemic began here in New York in March, the majority of our complaints have been about price gouging by retail companies. Both big and small companies that after the state of emergency, basically the governor issued a state of emergency and said everyone, like all the businesses shut down except for essential businesses like grocery stores, pharmacies, right? People were told to go home, stay home, right? And isolate for a while. And they were told to buy certain products to take care of themselves, right? To wear face coverings, to use hand sanitizers, right? And all of these products, suddenly the prices went through the roof. The stores began charging a lot of money. To give you a comparison, hand sanitizer they used to sell for like $2, now it's being sold for $22. Face mask, the same, really high increases in prices. So two things happened. People lost their jobs because in many cases, because we have a lot of immigrants in New York, they do not qualify for federal benefits. So they don't get unemployment insurance benefits. They go home, no salary, then they're told by the government, buy these products to take care of yourself, and they go to the store and they can't afford them. They're too expensive. So my office had to publish an emergency rule that said price gouging is illegal. You cannot charge more than 10% of the price of what you were charging before the pandemic, so that we could protect these consumers who desperately needed to be able to buy these products, right? Now, this is an extraordinary action, really, by my office, because typically we don't control pricing. We say you can charge whatever you want, people, it's up to them. As long as you notify what the price is, it's fine, right? But in this situation, because of the emergency, the state of emergency, we thought it was necessary. To give you some context, we got close to 40,000 complaints last, 2020, right? We typically get about 15,000 complaints in a year, right? We got 14,000 complaints just on price gouging. That is just one type of violation, right? And the majority of those complaints, again, were in neighborhoods that were the poorest neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where we had the most infection numbers of COVID-19, right? So it was very important for us to put a lot of resources into investigating these complaints. And I believe that now we went from sometimes having up to 2,000 complaints in a week to having now maybe just a handful of complaints a week. So we do think the problem has been mostly addressed, but it is something that was caused by the pandemic, and it's something that we felt strongly we needed to prioritize. Another complaint that I would say we were getting a lot last year, although I don't have numbers for this, is debt collection practices. So we license debt collectors, and as you can imagine, a lot of people, because of the financial crisis, they could not pay their bills, their debts, and they started getting more and more calls and communications from debt collector companies who wanted their money, right? We also published some rules to protect consumers during the period of the pandemic so that they could get these companies to stop collecting, at least during the state of emergency when people didn't believe, were not able to afford these. So I would say that that's really being a lot of the work that's taken priority for us has been price gouging. And even though we're not talking necessarily about worker protection, but this is another important piece of it, because once New York started reopening, we allowed businesses to reopen, but with a lot of rules, right? They had to have social distance. They had to make sure all customers come in with a face mask. So we were getting a lot of complaints from employees and customers who said the business is not complying with the business reopening laws, rules. So those kinds of complaints took priority last year. And it's more of a public health issue, right? So even though it's about consumers too, it's also a public health purpose to make sure that we don't, that we allow people to protect themselves, and that we don't, that basically we're able to defeat the virus. So it's been, a complicated issue because it was new to us too. It was new to everyone, right?
All right. So the next question, I try to bring something for we talk about is I try to mix. If I made some mistake, okay, you can fix me, correct me. But I try to bring something like this. For example, we have this. For example, in Brazil, we have here web portal. For example, Reclame Aqui, the biggest public web portal for complaining of customer. Considered one of the biggest in the world. Mauricio Vargas, a friend of mine who was the owner, creator of this website, he passed away last week about COVID. He created this website, Reclame Aqui. It's like a complaint here, would be the name. We have a protest website. We have consumidor.org.gov that was created by government. Sintel is a syndicator for employee. We have association for customer relationship, federation. We have in Brazil, for example, a salary of customer agent is 1,000 reais. It look like $203 a month. Mm-hmm. We have almost 119 laws involve customer defense right in Brazil. In New York, I found some website I found 12, 14 laws to human rights, consumer rights. The salary for agent in New York is biggest, almost $2,100 per month, almost 10 times more than Brazilian. In São Paulo, for example. With this situation, I think in the last 10 years in Brazil, we are facing a problem of the culture, how to create a company for culture, for customer. Okay, we start in 1999, bring a CRM concept. Okay, we bring software. Now, 10 years later, we saw that software is not enough. Let's bring the concept of customer experience, customer success. What do you think are missing in New York to bring the culture of the customer for the company, to bring the balance, you know? Because in Brazil, for example, okay, we are not going to pay enough salary for agent because they are going to leave in 3 months. Okay, I would like to listen a little about your opinion about this, the culture, how to bring the culture. If you have, okay, you have the problem in New York, you have the problem in Brazil, but we are the same. But here in Brazil, we are advancing in a situation, okay, we are Brazilian are considered the best, okay, we are human, we are funny, we are happy, but the salary is bad. How the culture invest? How I'd like to listen about your opinion about this.
Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting issue, right? Because oftentimes as consumers, we want to make sure that we are saving money, right? We want to make sure that if we can save more dollars, more money in our pockets, that's better, right? Whether it's services or products, right? And so sometimes companies will, because there's competition, they will try to pay as little as possible their employees so that they can sell a cheaper product and they'll be able to sell more, right? I think it's and I don't know that I have any solutions. I've been thinking a lot about consumers and what role we play in how we affect the conditions for workers, okay? Because I know that if I pay very little for a restaurant meal, right, or if I pay very little for a product, it's very possible the people who worked doing that work are also not getting paid okay, right? And even though you were comparing the salary, the hourly rates, right, between Brazil and New York, right now New York now went up to $15 an hour. New York. Now that's just the state, right? Because outside of New York, there's different rates, right? And it's higher than it's ever been, but it's still not enough for a person who lives in New York to be able to pay for housing, which is super expensive, and food and health insurance, whatever they need, right? So it's still a minimum wage. And so I think there's a lot of tension between how does a company serve both their consumers who are expecting better pricing, right? Faster service, right? And how do they treat their workers? And I don't have any answers for that, but I am beginning to think about how, as consumers myself, I question a lot the decisions that I make in which companies I support, right? Am I going to go buy my products from Amazon, which is a huge online retailer, or am I going to go buy my products from the business in my block, right? That have small entrepreneurs that are struggling to make ends meet, right? But I will probably pay them more, right? If I have to buy from. So it's really, I think, a conflict sometimes, but I think there needs to be a lot more education on consumers on what your spending habits result into, right? And so for companies, I think the more the consumers start thinking about their own impact in the world when they purchase something, when they buy something, the more the companies are going to have to follow, and they're going to have to care not just about the consumer, but also their workers.
Yeah, because Lorelei, okay, the one of the duties of your department. Okay, I'm going to help the consumer, but you have to help the the entrepreneur, educate them how to relationship with if the company don't fix your behavior, okay, you are going to apply a fine. Okay, you are going to charge, and then someday you are going to learn. It's the same in Brazil. It's Procon, is the famous department here in Brazil. However, we saw many faculty, university. Okay, we are prepared, the good marketers, we prepare good salesmen, but we don't have good faculty learn. Normally, I say this: we prepare many hunters, but less farmers. You know how to take care of the customer. We are good enough to bring them, but not to take care.
Yeah.
So what your challenge to educate, make the balance? Okay, how today's consumer have to make this type of education, but in Chinatown I have to educate them. What do you think is missing? Is education, colleague, academy? What you missing? The point to help you to not to apply fine or charge the what you think is missing to help in long term? Okay.
Yeah, so I think in New York specifically, right, I have to say the smallest businesses, the ones that oftentimes continue to fail like certain rules, right? Oftentimes is because they either don't have the time because a small business run by someone who's always working, right? They don't have the ability to hire other consultants and people who come, the accountants, it's very minimal what they can do to like educate themselves and help themselves to grow, and also to figure out how to treat and improve the relationship with consumers, right? So I think for the small businesses, they need to be able to rely more on an organization that advocates for them, right? So we have some of that. We do have some of that. Some we call chambers of commerce, and we have some of business associations, right? But oftentimes the smallest businesses, the immigrant-owned businesses, don't join as members. And I think that's where they can get a lot of the information. Because to be honest, we know, I recognize that we always have new updates in the law, right? And even if we go to educate the business 1 month, we go with this set, we bring the materials, we don't issue fines, but we just show them what to do. Maybe in 6 months, there's going to be a new change, and we won't be able to go to that same business, right? So they either have to be able and willing to access the information to look for it, because there are too many businesses, and the challenge for us is we're still small, right? We're small in the sense that we cannot cover and visit every business. Like, let me tell you an example. Last year, during the pandemic, we were trying to show the businesses how to open safely their businesses, right? And how to comply with all the social distancing, all of the rules. We visited about 2,000 businesses in New York City, door to door, one by one, right? We walked in there, here's masks, here's everything you need. But that's a very small segment of all the businesses in New York, right? And we can't cover all of them. So I think a lot of the times it's not that they're not willing to invest in like developing more resources to support and engage with the consumers and improve the relationship. I think sometimes they just run in very small profit margins, and they don't have the ability to hire like people who can help them, and we only can touch them once in a while, right? So, and also one more thing I would have to say is the competition with the online retailers, right? So you have the small business paying high rents, right? Paying workers, right? Trying to do everything. And then you have the online retailer that can cut down on a lot of costs and is targeting sort of like people who are very technologically like advanced, right? And they do all the shopping online. And I think that there's a lot of tension there too, right? I would be worried about soon you don't see any more businesses, bakeries and little restaurants, but everything is online. That I don't think that would like to see a world like that. But right now there's a lot of competition between the small businesses and the big online retailers.
Yeah. Now, another question. If you could remember, what was in your life as a consumer, what was your best customer experience you had, and the worst and you had in your life?
Oh wow, that's
The best that make you remember to today. The best first, the best. What the best you remember to today?
That's a really great question. It's hard to tell, to be honest. It's really hard to tell. The only thing I can say is that there's a few local restaurants that I love in my area, and a lot of it has to do with exactly what you pointed out to, right? The servers, the people who are helping you choose, what you're going to eat, the waiters, waitresses, they spend a lot of time trying to make you, the customer, feel comfortable, happy. You're there and it feels like a treat, right? So there's like 2 or 3 restaurants that continue to go to all the time, because I've never had a bad experience, because it comes from the management, where you go there and you're just treated like royalty, right? And so I don't have any other examples like that. I think that's like what I can say, because I think it does matter a lot how you train your staff to interact with the customers, right?
And about the worst, remember the bad, or you don't need to say the name of the company, but
I would have to say it was a couple of airlines, really, like 2 different airlines.
Until now, all my guests until now, if I could make a pool, the airline is winning. Okay.
Yes. I've had my worst experiences with a couple of airlines. I mean, one of them was that they lost my luggage, but then they refused to like even help me figure out. I had nothing. I was traveling somewhere for 4 days. So think about it. If I'm going to wait 4 days for my luggage, how am I dealing with anything, right? Then they wanted me to go back to the airport. It was just a mess, and they refused to. They said, we're going to give you some money for your inconvenience so you can buy some clothes, so you have something to wear. It took a long time, and then they would say, we're going to give you $30. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take the $30. They never sent it to you. And ultimately I resolved it, but I had to do so much work to get the money. It wasn't even worth it. And I think I did it because, I'm a consumer protection person, right? And I was like, I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to pursue it until it gets resolved. But it was disappointing. And the other airlines, same. They left us stranded somewhere. They sent us to a really horrible place to sleep, and we had to pay for it. And it was just a mess. And I think sometimes even the communications piece of it matters a lot, right? I much more care about you telling me, honestly, this is what I can do, and that's it. And even if I'm frustrated or angry, if you explain it to me and you say it as best as you can and you're compassionate, I think what you were saying about how to talk to customers, right, matters a lot. And if you're ignored, then that's really frustrating, right?
The code of consumer in Brazil that is created by the government, I think that I could brief this code as the three phrase for the company. If the company did something wrong, fix, ask for excuse for the customer, and don't try to make this again. Don't repeat this, to avoid the not learning what happened. You think most of the company in New York, they are learning when you make a sue or fine for the company. They try, because many of company in Brazil, okay, no, I'm not going to fix my process because the cost of the fine is low. What do you think is facing New York in US? They are trying to learn, or no, they prefer pay the fine?
You know what? It's an excellent question. It depends. Some businesses really made a mistake, right? Or really were not aware of the law and they want to fix it, right? There are some businesses have to tell you that we have actually gone to court with, to sue them because they've had several investigations in the past by other agencies and they never fixed the problem, right? So we took even more aggressive action. But it's complicated because New York City is a very good, broad consumer protection law, but it's still outdated. It was established over 50 years ago, and since then, the fines have not been updated. So we have low fines, right?
Brazil has the same.
Yes, so it's not an incentive for the businesses to comply. So my office is actually working on trying to update the law to at least raise the fines up for inflation, right? To make it more of an incentive for companies to comply. But so it's both. There are companies who really want to figure out how to do the right thing. And there are some where if you don't go and impose all the fines you can, they're not going to fix it. And to be perfectly honest about this, Heverton, when you ask me about the worst consumer experience, I was thinking about my work, right? And some of the worst cases that I've seen have been where consumers not only didn't get a good product, but on top of that, they were actually deceived. They actually were told to sign loan documents, right? Or paperwork that got them into really high interest purchases, right? And so not only did you sell them a bad product, but you destroy this person's credit, right? And so that is where we're putting a lot of our efforts into to really combat that kind of practice.
Yeah, because in long term, if everybody have respect, they are going to learn. Okay, we are not going to be perfect, but we are not to focus on one problem, fixing long term, right? Because they are facing because if they have bad low wages, they destroy their life, financial life. Yeah. You are right. Yeah. In Brazil, for example, in 2019, in electronic commerce, we had 18,000 complaints, 80,000 complaints in 2019. Last year, was double.
Wow. That's
just because there are many fake websites. They try to sell a lot, but they don't have a logistic to deliver.
Yeah.
How was your experience in electronic commerce in New York in this COVID?
Yeah, it's one of those challenges for our work, right? Because a lot of the e-commerce activity, especially if it's a fraudulent company, right, or the kind of company that disappears once you start investigating, it's really hard to help the consumer, right, and to get them their money back, right? It's really, really hard. And actually, when I was saying that our law has to be updated, it's not just to increase the fines, but the law was in place before the internet was a thing. So we need to make sure it's clear in the law that we can investigate these kinds of issues. We find that it's more important for us to actually prevent. So we talk to consumers a lot about how not to buy online unless they are familiar with the company, and not to fall for the kind of traps that you see. Sometimes people get emails with invitations to purchase something, or a text, right? And WhatsApp and social media. And we tell them, don't follow those links. Go to the official site of the company, research the company before you buy anything from them. Because if it's only operating online, it may be difficult for us to actually do anything about it, especially if the company is overseas, right? Or in a different state. Even if we find there's a violation, we have some limitations on our legal authority to go after the company. So it is a huge challenge, and I think that we spend more time trying tips for prevention than we can actually solve for the issue. If the company is big, as a big retailer online and more established, it's easier to pressure them into complying and resolving the issues. But if you end up getting scammed by a fake company that looks like the real one, then
Yeah.
that's a problem, right? And we
Right.
see that a lot.
Yeah. For example, in you said that okay, you had many challenges to face. You try to make a prioritization of the people who need more the consumer protection. But in long term, what your challenge more you because okay, the consumer department is long term, not independent of the Obama. Long term, what do you think you will try to create the culture of the consumer in your department for long term? What if you could say in 10 years, what are you going to get?
Yeah, I mean, I
You'd
think
like,
the
you'd like.
for us the challenge has always been keeping up with technology, right? So think about a government bureaucracy, right? That until last year, our inspectors still had to issue violations in paper, write down all the violations. They couldn't connect to our system, our computers in the office to see if this business had a violation before,
Yeah.
right? So, because now if you know that they violated the law before, you can assess more fines, but you can't tell because you don't have access. So even the technology, only this year, the inspectors have like tablets that are connected via internet to the database at the office. And so they can go now and see what the history is for the business, right?
Yeah.
So that's very tricky because for an agency of our size, we don't have a lot of money. So if I think about the future and how people are doing consumer transactions, it's going to be very important for us to continue to advance our technology, to
Yeah.
be able to have people do a complaint on an app, right?
Right.
That it just seems to me a little overwhelming to think about, because it takes us a long time to get
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah, one in the last I think 3 years, I'm a lazy consumer. I want to make complaint without effort or reduce the effort. For example, one of the suggestions I provide already for Juliana, for other people who in charge of the consumer department in Brazil. My suggestion was, in each state we have the Procon, is the name of department. As you had yours, we had here in Brazil the Procon. But now, 2 years ago, the government, federal government, created the consumer.gov. It's a federal website to complain, register there. My suggestion was, we have the Brazilian consumer has to have just one channel. Okay, don't matter the state, in the south, in the north, but for the analyst of department, for the consumer, the front end has to see the same. To reduce the effort of the consumer to register the complaint, for analyst of the department to see 360 view of the everything of the company, of the complaint, of the consumer, all the history. If we got this in the future, it will be better for everybody, because and then we are going to substitute the sent, as I previous the sent expedite that I showed you in the previous slide, for the technology,
Yeah.
Now we have to pray because the effort.
Yes,
So
I know.
that,
Yeah.
I understood. I think you have faced the same problem here in Brazil.
Yes, yes. It's really hard, and I think we need to be creative all the time, especially in government. You have to be creative, and we always have to try to be as flexible as like the private companies who can move faster, right, to make improvements and explore new ways of communicating with consumers. We have to keep up, otherwise it's going to be frustrating for people who are so used to like instant communications, right? It's
Exactly.
hard to tell them, sign up and register and then create an account and then do this, do that. People don't have the patience for that.
Exactly. I think I hope in long term, because many data are open, many API web services are open. So we have to bring this intelligence as you can use as an arm to make the bad decision of the behavior of the company for the consumer. Because as I said in Brazil, okay, we have problem with the company and with consumer too. We will have bad consumer too. Not the fault is not just for the company. We have some lazy consumer that take advantage of the customer, the company. We have to educate both sides. Okay, it bring the government in the middle to make the balance. The relationship. That my think. And in the beginning of this magazine, I interviewed José Yamagoshi. He's the president of the Professional Like Me in Peru.
Okay.
In Peru, we are facing the same problem in Brazil. Because, as I said for you, this focus in customer experience we have just 10 or 50 years.
Yeah.
What we are doing in New York, many people are going to try to replicate in the future. Now we have to work and make the path for the new generation, right?
Yeah, especially because now you have like companies that are global companies, right?
Yes, exactly.
They have consumers everywhere, right? Everywhere in the world.
Yeah. After this vaccination that they are facing in New York, it's better the environment for you. You think the store, the business is better after the vaccine that you are facing. You think the feeling is good for you in the street?
Yes, I mean, obviously there's still concern about the variances of the virus, right? The new variances. But I think that people are very encouraged by the vaccines, right? And you see there's some distrust, but a lot of people are getting vaccinated. And for instance, for New York City government, May 3rd is when we expect to bring more employees back to the office, following social distance guidelines, right? But I think also it's a sign that we want more people out and trying to get back to a little bit more normal life. And I do see people, the spring is here, nicer weather, people are going out, and we have done a lot to help restaurants, for instance, open their outdoor seating so people have a lot of cafes to go to so they can still be outdoors, right? But enjoy a meal. So it feels good, the energy is good, but we still have to be cautious. And I see a lot of compliance in New York with wearing face masks. I wear 2 face masks, even though I'm fully vaccinated, because you never know, right? And I think that's going to last for a little while.
Yeah. So don't matter the career in customer service, attorney, technology, process, company, sales. You agree that okay, for the long term, the people who is going to watch this interview during the week, we have many opportunities yet to work with customer relationship. You agree with that, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, good. My last question: if God would ask you for a new challenge in your life, what would you like to embrace?
So my boss, the mayor of New York, this year is his last year, right, in office. Then there'll be elections for a new mayor. So I really have begun thinking about what's next for me. And I really, I'm interested in looking more at the intersection between consumer rights and protections and workers' benefits and protections, right? So what I mentioned earlier about how can you use your consumer actions to improve the world around you, right? And is that something that we can get more consumers to do? So I'd be happy to talk about that some other time, but that's something that I think fits well with what I've learned until now, and I just want to spend some time working on that.
Yeah. So I think you and me, as I could understood, we are going to work for 2 or more life in this subject to fix everything in the earth.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Lorelei, everybody, I invite you to know more about Lorelei and his work and the DCWP website. He's in footer in the live. I invite you contact me if you need more information about her. Thank you very much for your participation, Lorelei. And we hope we work together in the future with acknowledgement, experience, and bring you in Brazil to bring your acknowledgement of work and your culture of customer experience. Thank you very much, okay?
Thank you, Heverton, for the opportunity, and I really look forward to reading some of your writing and to learning more about what you've been doing in Brazil. Thank you.
Okay. I invite everybody for next week. We are going to interview Eugenia Garcia. He's the director of the Instituto Mexicano of the Teleservicios, the main association of call center in Mexico. Okay, thank you. Have a good week, and see you. Bye, Lorelei.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Pessoal, muito obrigado. Eu convido vocês a conhecerem meus livros na Amazon. Só procurar pelo meu nome e espero vocês na próxima semana. Muito obrigado e fique com Deus.